In this series of lessons, we're going to be looking at nested comps and pre-comps. Now, this is a very important aspect of After Effects, especially with regards to workflow. And we're going to be creating something like this, which is a kind of a very simple sort of television lineup, which if you work as a motion designer or specifically a broadcast motion designer, you will end up doing this kind of thing. Probably, it's most likely. And what we're going to be doing is essentially creating a template. So with a television lineup, it's something that you sort of design once, you create a template for yourself, and then every week or every day or something like that, you have to update the content in it. So, tonight, these are the shows that are playing at these times. And understanding how nested comps and pre-comps work is going to be integral to creating a really great template that you can update very easily, and it just kind of streamlines your workflow and makes updating it very, very easy and very quick. So I'm just going to play this back quickly so you can see more or less what it looks like. So we've just got each show animating in and out with the various details below it. This sort of thing is usually accompanied by a voiceover to kind of read you through it. Usually not a lot of time is allocated, so having a voiceover really helps so that people don't have to sit and read and maybe miss something. This one that I've created is perhaps a little quick, but you'll get the idea. So I'm going to start a new project. I'm going to do this from the beginning. Right, so in my project panel, I'm going to double click in here, and the first thing I want to do is to bring in my 3 images that I've chosen here. So I've just decided for my TV show, these are the shows that on my television channel, this is the lineup that I want to have. We've got an image from Black Books, an image from Children's Hospital, and then an image from The Thick of It. And I've just pulled these images off Google Images, and they're not, a couple of them are not really very big, they're quite small images. Based on my design, I don't really need high resolution images. They're going to be almost like little thumbnails on the screen, so I'm not too worried about that. I'm just going to select all 3 of them there and click open. And so here they are in my project panel. The next thing I need to do is to create a new composition. I'm going to start by creating the main composition. I want to give each show about 4 seconds of time on the screen. That includes the transitions of them animating in and out. So 12 seconds, that's right. I'm using the same preset as I usually do. I don't want to go full HD. For the purposes of this demonstration, it's not really worth going full HD. It'll just kind of slow things down. So this half HD works well because it's the same aspect ratio as full HD. So there's my resolution. Make sure that my frame rate is 25. If I'm making this for South African television, it has to be 25 frames per second. That's very important. Make sure that it's square pixels as well. That's also very important. And click OK. Right, so first thing I'm going to do is to create this effect of the images kind of sliding in and out of an invisible floor with a little reflection. So what I want to do is I want to create a composition that each image sits inside of. This is going to be my main composition that everything happens in. But I want another composition inside here, a nested composition. So I'm going to click the Create New Composition button again. And this time I'm going to change these settings. I want it to be a square image. So I'm going to change the resolution to, I want it to be too big. it's going to be maybe half the height of my screen at the most. So the height at the moment is 720, half of that is 360. So I'm going to go 360 and the width also 360 to keep it square. Make sure I've got this turned off, otherwise it's going to adjust these numbers to keep the proportion. The frame rate stays the same. Duration is not really important. As long as it's too long and not too short, that is okay. And I'm going to call this composition let's call it just 1. Okay. So now I'm going to drop my first image into this composition. Let's zoom in here. It's a little bit shorter than the comp, so I just want to scale it up. I'm just holding down the shift key here so it doesn't squash it. Scale it up so it fills the whole height of the composition. And it's a little awkward because 2 of my actors' faces here have been cut off, so I'm going to go for either these 2 or these 2. I'm going to go for this one. And now what I want to do is to animate it sliding from the bottom of the comp out of frame up like this. So I want this transition to take about half a second. It shouldn't take too long. So I'm going to go to half a second, open up my transform settings here and just hit the stopwatch on the position, go back to 0 and then slide it down out of the frame. Again, I'm just holding down shift so it slides down in a straight line and doesn't move side to side like that. Then I'm just going to grab this last keyframe here as well and hit F9 so that it eases nicely into the comp. I could also just go into the graph editor and just tweak the curve there so it eases in a bit more. Okay, so this is going to be on screen for 4 seconds. So I'm going to go to 3.5 seconds, add another keyframe in its current position by hitting this button over here, then go to exactly 4 seconds and slide it back down out of the frame. And then it's automatically set this keyframe to an ease keyframe. I'm going to command click, or if you're on a PC, control click on that keyframe just to reset it to a linear frame. Maybe go into the graph editor and tweak that out so it's consistent. So there's my animation. Now what's important to note about when you're working inside a comp like this that's going to be inserted into another composition is that this background area here is in fact transparent. If I click the toggle transparency grid button over here, it changes to like a checkerboard, and the checkerboard shows me any areas of the image that are transparent. So now if I go back into my comp 1, which is going to be my main comp, perhaps I'll just rename that main comp. I'm going to take this new comp that I've made, this little square one that has my first image in it, and I'm going to drop that inside it just by dragging and dropping into main comp. And now you'll see this is what it's going to look like. So there my image is done, my animation is done. What I want to do is to create a nice little reflection for this image. And the way I'm going to do that is by using a duplicate of this composition. Alright, so I'm just going to select the image, hit Command D to duplicate it, and what I want to do is to take this duplicate that I've made and kind of invert it upside down and just position it below here so it looks like a reflection. So there's a couple of ways I can do that. I can grab one of the handles here at the top and just scale it on the y-axis like that, and then move it down. But you'll see that it's scaling around the anchor point in the middle at the moment. What I can do is move the anchor point to the exact bottom. So I'm going to click the pan behind tool, or the anchor point tool, which is up here. The shortcut key is Y. And I'm going to grab the anchor point and move it down here. I'm also going to hold down the command key on my keyboard. So again, for PC that will be Control. And the anchor point is going to snap into the middle center here. And now if I just go back to my selection tool, now when I scale this image, it's going to scale down to the bottom rather than from the middle. So I want my reflection to be a little bit sort of squashed, so I'm just going to leave it kind of like that. Okay, so the other cool thing about the way this is set up is that because we've duplicated a pre-comp, the content inside this composition, i.e. what's going on here, does not change after I've duplicated it. So the animation inside it will stay the same. These layers still point back to the same composition in my project panel over here. So while I can treat this one differently inside this composition, what's going on inside it stays constant. So now I've got this kind of effect going on. And now I need to make this look a little bit more like a reflection. Now what I want to do is to rename this layer as well, so I don't start getting confused. And this is another important point. So if I hit return here, and I'm going to rename it to 1 reflection, you'll see that the layer underneath has square brackets around the 1. The square brackets indicate that the name of this layer is the same as the name it was given over here. It's the same as the name of the actual pre-composition. This one's lost its square brackets. This indicates that I've changed the name to something else. But something that you can do if you start getting confused and like, well, is this the same comp? Is you can click up here where it says layer name, and it will change to what's called source name. And this shows me the name of the source. In other words, the name of the media that I've imported or dragged into my timeline. So this layer name here exists only inside this composition. That's just my sort of preference that I've renamed them to that. But the name of the actual composition stays the same. And now I know if I click on this, so it shows me the source name, that these are in fact the same bits of footage, if you like. So I'll click back to go to layer name. And now I'm going to add a couple of effects to this. The first one I want to add is called a compound blur. Now, if you don't have this panel already open, it's called Effects Controls. You can come up to Window and come down here to Effects Controls and click on that, and it'll open up the Effects Controls panel. Sometimes, if I'm working on a nice big screen, I like to click and drag this panel onto the side so I can see my project and my effects controls at the same time. So on the reflection, I want to make it a little bit blurry. So I'm going to right click on the layer and come up to Effect, and then go to Blur and Sharpen, and then we've got a whole bunch of different types of blur effects. The one I'm looking for is called Compound Blur. Now what Compound Blur does is it asks you for a layer to define which parts of the image are going to be blurry and which parts of the image are not going to be blurry. So I need to create a black and white or grayscale image that represents what part of this is going to be blurry and which isn't. So the effect that I really want is kind of like a fall-off blur. So it starts off here where the two images meet as quite sharp, and then as it goes downwards, it's going to become more and more blurry. Sort of like the plane it's sitting on is sort of made of some kind of rough material. So I need to make this map, and it needs to be the same size as one of these little comps. So I'm going to click the new comp button again, and my settings are still here from the previous time, so I can just click OK. And then I'm going to rename this new comp gradient. And I'm going to create a new solid. It really doesn't matter what color it is. And I'm going to add another effect to this solid. It's going to be effect, generate, gradient ramp. And gradient ramp has made for me a gradient from black to white, from top to bottom, and that's exactly what I want. The default settings in this case is just what I want. I might have to swap the colors around, but I can do that afterwards. So back in my main comp, now what I need to do is get this gradient ramp layer sitting exactly on top of this one. So the way I do that is to select my reflection, which already has the this sort of inverse scale on it, and to duplicate that layer. And now I want to replace this comp with this new one that I made. And to do that in After Effects, you first select the composition that you want to replace with another. Then you come up here to your project panel and you click and drag the new composition down onto your project panel. Then you hold down the Alt key on your keyboard. And while you're holding down the Alt key, you let go of the mouse. And now you'll see it's replaced that image with this gradient that I made, this white to black gradient. You'll notice that the layer name, After Effects has just left it the same. When I duplicated it, it called it Reflection 2. But if I click on this again to see the source name, I'll see, okay, that's that composition, that's the same one down there, and this one actually points to a different comp. This is now gradient. So back to my layer names, I'm going to rename this one to gradient so I don't get confused. And you'll see now it has the square brackets, so it shows me, this name is the same name as its source. Now what I want to do is go back to my reflection layer and come up here to the compound blur, and here where it says blur layer, I'm going to say the layer you're looking for is this one, gradient 1. And now I'm also going to need to hide this layer. And if I just zoom in here, you'll see what it's done is based on the black to white gradient, it said, okay, here up here where the let's see, the white pixels are, it's made it super blurry, and then down here where the black pixels are in the gradient, it's quite sharp. So basically this is the wrong way around. But what I can do up here in the compound blur settings is hit invert blur, and it just inverts the gradient for me. It doesn't affect the source inside here, it only inverts it after that, after the fact. So I'm nearly there. Next thing I need to do, I might just tune down the strength of the blur a bit, maybe half it to about 10, so the effect isn't so extreme. Oops, let me just try that again. So my gradient, you see, has a blur on it as well because I duplicated that layer and I duplicated the effect along with it. I'll just delete that because it's not needed. Alright, the next thing I want to do is for my my blur to become or my reflection to become less opaque or more transparent as it falls off down here. And I'm going to use what's called the track matte setting to do that. And the way this works is I'm taking a layer directly above the one I want to apply it to, and I'm telling it that the track matte is the layer directly above it. I'm telling it how to act. Basically what this is going to do is look at the brightness of the pixels in this layer and then decide what parts of this image are going to be transparent or opaque depending on that. So if I hit the track matte button, and if you can't see this, you might just need to click this middle switch down here. Track matte, and it's going to be Luma matte. And you'll see that now my image starts to get less opaque the further down it goes. So I've now got a bit more of a convincing looking reflection. The other thing I want to do at this point is to add in a background, because I'm not going to be working against solid black. So I'm just going to go create a new solid. I'm going to use this pale blue color, and I'll just bring it down to the background. Now, because of the way that the blur works, there's almost like a little space here between my reflection and my image. So I might just grab the reflection here and just move it up a little bit so that that gap disappears. Okay, so I've completed the effect here, and that's what it looks like. And now the next stage would be to build a design around this, and we'll look at that in the next part of the lesson.